I wanted to ask you, what do you think the most important and useful emotion is?
That's a tough question, man.
It's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought about it too. I'll give my answer as well, but I think ours might be the same.
I think it sounds cliche, but I think it's...
What's up, everybody? Couple Casuals Podcast, episode number 28. I am your host, Stefano, and we're back again with another fantastic episode. This one is going to be a very insightful, amazing, useful episode because I have a very amazing guest with me here today. Before I get into it, I want to give a little background, a little perspective. Throughout my experience of like podcasting and stuff, brother, I've met a lot of people. I've learned a lot of different things, but there's sometimes where you meet a really genuine person. And that's what I feel with you, brother.
Dude.
I feel like we connected on that level, and then now it's full circle, and we're back again, and we're here having a conversation. So, Sam Demma, welcome to the podcast.
I'm honored, man. I'm holding your words in my heart. I appreciate that.
Yes, I mean it, brother.
Feel the same way.
So, big salute, as we say here. So, I kind of want to start with your shoe game, brother. Your shoe game, Sam's shoe game is absolutely unreal. So, I need to get into that, brother. Like, what's your shoe collection? Every time I see a video of you, brother, you got a new pair of amazing kicks on. And I'm like, the first question I got to ask Sam is about his shoe collection. Because I had to rock a nice pair
They're looking
today.
nice, man.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
And the style, Sam, unbelievable.
I've never been one for materialistic things, especially growing up. When I was an athlete, my mental routine started the moment I laced up my soccer cleats.
Yes.
And the moment I finished lacing up the left shoe, tied the bow, that was the mental cue that it was game time. And when I stopped playing sports and started speaking, I decided I wanted to have a similar routine in that arena. And so I bought a pair of white Nike shoes, and I would change them backstage or in my car before walking into the venue to remind myself that it's about to be game time, to get into that mental state.
Okay. So I knew there was going to be a deep story behind this. Keep going, brother. Keep going.
And I was in Nova Scotia doing a keynote for NSSA, the Nova Scotia Secondary Students Association, and they saw me changing my shoes backstage. And they asked me why, and I explained to them this little story. And they ended up custom making me a pair of shoes with their logo on the tongue and shipping it to me. And I remember when I received it, one, feeling extremely grateful, and two, thinking, why am I just limiting myself to one pair? I like shoes. This is a cool little game I'm playing now. And so I went to the store and I bought a couple pairs, and now it's a big part of my routine before I step out on stage. So that's really where the shoes come from and how it plays a part in my speaking.
So there is a deeper meaning behind it, because every time, obviously, the content of what you're speaking about is tremendous, which I'm going to get into. But I always look, your stage presence is phenomenal, and then like just the get up. I'm like, this guy's got style, and I can appreciate that too.
I just recently went shopping to buy some new clothes.
So how many pairs of shoes you got? How many J's you got? Like, what's your favorite kind?
I have four. Right now, I have 4 game time shoes. Is
Game
what I
time
call
shoes.
them.
Okay.
And they're all Air Maxes.
Yes. The
And-
Nike. So you're a Nike boy.
Yeah.
Let's
and
go.
I like them. Maybe Nike Toronto wants to reach out and sponsor.
Hey,
You know?
we're emptying our backpack, but we also want to fill it up maybe with some shoes, maybe with some kicks. You know what I mean? But that's amazing, brother. I just wanted to touch on that a bit because I think it's awesome and I appreciate that.
Of course.
But what I want to start with now for real is, who is Sam Demma? For the people that are tuning in that maybe didn't watch the It's Simple podcast, because we had a fantastic chat there, which, like I was saying in the intro, when you meet people, there's certain people that stick out, and you were one of them, just based on your authenticity and just how genuine you were and your actual real intention to help people. I feel like there's a genuine drive behind that, and I think we can get into it further today, which I want to do. But for the people that are tuning in and are just maybe learning about you for the first time, who is Sam Demma?
I think I've had many different evolutions. If you asked me this question 7 years ago, I would have told you a professional athlete. If you asked me this when I was a little kid, I would have told you a Power Ranger. You know, like, I had different iterations. I feel like not having to tie ourselves to one identity is really important. So I think I've been an evolution of so many different things, but at my core, I come from my family and my grandparents. So I'll start with that.
Yeah.
I am half Italian, half Greek. Both sides of grandparents came from little to nothing. My Italian grandfather, Sam, I share the same name.
I love that.
Which is a
What's the
big
full
connection.
Italian name though?
Salvatore.
Salvatore.
Yeah,
I
they
knew
call
it.
me Toto.
Yeah,
It's like
love
the
it.
Sicilian nickname. And he came here with nothing and worked 2 jobs to provide a life for my dad and their family. Same with my great-grandparents. And for me, it cultivated this value and this belief that if you want something in life, you can have it. Just be principled, be a good human being, and work hard towards it. And I grew up pursuing my first dream, which was to play professional soccer. I took it very seriously. I moved to Italy for 6 months when I was 13. At 17, I was on the brink of a full-ride scholarship at Memphis University in Tennessee. And I ended up having 3 major knee injuries and 2 surgeries, lost the ability to play. And at that point in my life, if you asked me that question, I would have told you Sam is a professional athlete. After that experience, I didn't know who I was. And I went on this road to discovery. And I think I found myself through service. I started this organization where we would pick up garbage in the community with our neighbors. And we ended up not really knowing what we were doing, but stumbled into this little group that ended up doing 350 cleanups and filling a couple thousand bags of garbage. And through that project, principals started reaching out saying, hey, Sam, can you come speak to our students? And I started delivering these presentations. And I just realized that I loved doing it. I felt like I was making a difference, and the students in the audience were getting involved in our organization. And so I kept doing it. And at one point, a principal handed me $50, and he said, consider this a deposit, because if you build a full-length program, we'll hire you to come back and deliver it to our entire school. And at that point, my identity slowly started shifting to Sam, the speaker. And now I've written a book. It's a best-selling book called Empty Your Backpack. It's a big part of my life as well. I'm writing a second book right now. It's a children's picture book.
Love that.
I don't want to share too much about it yet.
Yeah.
And so I would say Sam has been a multitude of different identities, but today I consider myself the speaker, the author, and a community-minded person.
And you know what, brother, how relatable is that to people? Because I can relate to that as well. Like, you go through these different transitions in your life and you take from all the different experiences that you go through. And I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's exactly what you did throughout every single experience. You extracted something and curated it to bring it to now where you are today. So it's really important and worth noting for people, like, through the transitions you go through, your identity changes, but I feel like you can never be connected too much to one thing, because you are who you are. Like, you're Sam Demma, but at one point you were a soccer player. At one point you were this, that, and the other. And now you are where you are today, public speaking, right?
It's like your soul doesn't change.
Yeah, it stays. But
your soul stays the same, but the labels we give ourselves change, right?
Yes.
I look at myself and I think of myself like a ball of energy, and every human being is a ball of energy.
You are a ball of energy, by the way.
Thank you.
Very good energy.
And we wake up each day and we make choices to give our energy to certain activities.
Yes.
You give your energy to boxing enough, you end up labeling yourself a boxer. You give
Which
your energy,
happened at one point.
Yeah, right?
Which happened at one point, yeah.
You give your energy to soccer, you label yourself a soccer player. And so you strip away all the labels. We're just energy, and we make choices every day. And I think as my choices have changed in life, I've changed the labels I give myself. But at my core, I'm just energy, and my name's Sam Demma, and I'm hoping to give it to good people.
I love that, man. I love that. Now, we have to just kind of touch on the backpack a bit, because I know we talked about this before, but just for the people who are tuned in visually, especially, and see this amazing big backpack, what's the representation of Empty Your Backpack?
Yeah, it's an analogy for our minds, especially with young people. I think mindset is so important, that your thoughts determine your emotions, your emotions determine the actions you take, and your actions determine your results. And so if you want to change your result, you have to go to the foundation, which is what you're choosing to believe about yourself. But how do you make that tangible for a young person who's focused on social media and focused on drama and relationships and is going through so many hormonal changes young in their life? I thought something like a giant backpack as an analogy for our minds would help young people realize how important the thoughts are that they carry around every single day. And how if you carry negative thoughts, it changes the way you see yourself and the choices you make. But if you empty those thoughts, you have an opportunity to live a really individual life and pursue the things you're curious about and passionate about. And so Empty Your Backpack is really a message, not just for young people, but for anybody, to say, hey, you don't have to carry around negative thoughts and opinions, and you can be who you truly are, even if it disappoints the people around you.
And I want to get into the tour, but just off that, do you find, like, speaking to these kids and then getting out there and being a part of these conversations with the youth, do you find that is the biggest problem that they're facing? Like, what is, like, maybe a motif or or an important take back that you've kind of garnered through this experience of talking to these kids that of a challenge they're facing? Like what's is something that you can outline? Is it that? Is it the overthinking, the carrying the thoughts in comparison to others, in your opinion? Because now this is the second round of tour.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Kids are lonely, man. Kids are lonely. We did lots of presentations, and sometimes it's the words on stage that impact the students the most, but other times it's just the time spent with them in the gymnasium. We would set our stuff up, get ready for the presentation, and then grab basketballs and shoot hoops just to warm up and get ready for the speech. And on certain occasions, students would join us. Yeah. This one time we were in Boissevain, Manitoba, this very rural community, and there was 2 young students sitting in the gymnasium, and we invited them to play basketball with us. And we didn't really exchange any words, just threw the ball to each other a couple times, played 2-on-2, and the speech finished. We're packing up my grandma's minivan to start driving to our next school, our next show location, and the same student runs out the school building, and she's like, "Wait, I gotta tell you something." I'm like, "What is it?" She said, "That was the first time in a really long time that I felt seen and appreciated and valued. I have depression. Nobody really knows about it except for my mom, and I don't feel like I belong in this school community." In my head, I'm thinking, all we did was play basketball for 5 minutes in the gymnasium. I think students really struggle with loneliness, with feeling like they don't have many friends or connections, or that the way they want to express themselves won't be accepted by the people around them. And so I think that's a really big one. I think students also struggle with comparing themselves to other people, especially on social media. 100%. I think students struggle with figuring out what they want to do with their life, because we have this belief in our backpacks that there's only one right path. And if you're not a doctor, a dentist, or pursuing something through university, then you're somehow lesser than everybody else.
And just because if you do one thing doesn't mean you have to stick with that forever. These things change, like we touched on with the identity, right?
100%. So there's a multitude of challenges I think students face. Those are just a few of them that I've seen over and over again in schools. And I hope that the message helps them realize that, there are 3 things that determine the quality of their lives. The first is their circumstances, what they're born into. Sometimes those things we can't change, so we can only accept them and move forward. But the other 2 things are the choices you make and the beliefs you carry. And those 2 things you can change. And so giving them permission and also awareness that they have those 2 areas in their lives they can influence and make choices to change things, I hope helps them change their life in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, so that could be somewhat the remedy. And is that the content, like in regards to what you're speaking to them about? Is what would be, how would you summarize the content of the conversations and the talks that you're giving?
Yeah.
Like what does that look like?
If you're gonna want to connect with young people, you have to give them what they want, not what you think they need. You have to give them what they want and then put what they need baked in it. Because if you just stand on stage and start lecturing young people, they're not gonna listen to you.
100%.
I can't tell you how many times I finish a speech and kids walk up to me and they say, "You should be a stand-up comedian." Because the first 15 minutes of my set is a funny story about dancing in Costa Rica.
Yeah, I see you dancing and stuff. You're having fun.
Yeah, and after I win their hearts and their minds, then I bake in the pieces that I think they might take home with them, or else it's gonna fall on deaf ears. So I would summarize the content like a performance mixed in with some hard-hitting truths. And depending on what the school's challenges or problems are, I'll change the stories that I tell.
Okay, so you actually talk to them and get on like interpersonal level and find out what some of the challenges they're facing?
Sometimes I interview the students, like 4 or 5 students, or at least I'll interview the principal and some of the staff just to ask them, like, what are the challenges? What messages are you already sharing with the students that you're hoping they can hear more of?
So you do that with every school?
Yeah, man. First tour, we did 87 schools. I probably had like 250 plus sales calls just to book the 87 talks. And then every single one of those had a pre-planning event call and a post-event debrief call. So there's a lot of touch points to better understand the community before we arrive. I have it all on the calendar, like the calendar event in the notes section, like what their priorities are or focuses are, so that when I'm walking in, I can quickly read it and remind myself what I'm going to present today.
That's investing a lot of energy. How do you stay dialed in? And because when you have these conversations, Sam, these are deep-rooted conversations. These are deep-rooted talks. You're exchanging energy with these young youth. They're sharing stories like that. So you're kind of taking that with you away. I'd imagine you're a compassionate, empathetic guy in the industry that you're in. How do you manage like your emotions throughout that process of like speaking and getting into these deep-rooted conversations?
I first remind myself that I can't be the support person for every single student that I step in front of, my goal is to connect them to support, connect them to a resource, and also hopefully change their thoughts and beliefs. When I first started speaking, I acted as if I could be the person to support them and help them through all their traumas. And I would have like 50 kids in my DMs telling me about serious
Really?
things
So they
in their
reach
life.
out to you afterwards like that, eh?
Yeah. And at first I would be the therapist kind of, And I think students appreciated it, but I would spend hours typing messages to students who I've only met once in my life and who I know that I can't be there for them at all times. And so that was really tough and exhausting. What I do now is I'll step on stage, I'll do my program. After it finishes, I invite everyone to reach out, and then I'll make sure I can connect them to people that live in their community that they have access to 24/7 that can actually support them and help them through their journey.
Yes.
And then the way I keep myself sane is by executing my own non-negotiable habits that I know fill up my cup. Things like meditating each morning, things like journaling before bed, exercising,
Big time.
talking to my grandparents.
Okay.
A funny thing happens when I call my grandparents. I could be the most busy I've ever been in my life, and I call my grandma who has nothing to tell me or give me except for love and admiration. And I pick up the phone, and it just gives me goosebumps. It just brings me back to the present moment.
Aren't they just such special people? Like grandparents seem to be like, do you think it's like because of where they grew up and like the experiences they've been through, like kind of in relation to like what we're talking about? But they seem to be like, your parents are special, but then the grandparents, they bring this real like intimate, special vibe and just teachings and wisdom.
And they're at an age in their life where they're not pursuing much. They're just being and want to spend time with their family of whatever time they have left.
Yeah.
And I was at a wedding recently, and it was a beautiful wedding. And every person that I introduced myself to and talked to were the most down-to-earth, amazing people. And it was toward the end of the night, and I shook this guy's hand, and it was the father of the groom. I was like, it was a pleasure to meet you, and I had so much fun. I'm just so blown away by everyone in the room that's such a good, kind human being. And he looked at me, and he was a few drinks in. And he was
just a couple casuals.
And he was laughing. And he said, you know why? It's because everyone in this room doesn't want anybody from anyone else. They're just here to celebrate. They're not here for any other reason. And that's what I think of when I think about my grandparents. It's like, they just want to love you and support you and pour admiration over your heart. And I recognize that's not the situation for everyone's families.
Of course.
I'm blessed to have that in my life.
And you value it.
And that centers me, and that brings me back, and that keeps me grounded when I'm super busy. Just a quick phone call.
They're very encouraging as well.
Super encouraging.
Yeah, and that's just speaking on encouragement. I heard somebody once say, like, in regards to the youth, that they just lack encouragement. Do you find that through your experience that maybe that like a little sense of encouragement goes a long way with these young kids?
100%. And I think they have to wholeheartedly believe that the encouragement is something that
genuinely authentic.
Yeah.
And that you mean it.
Yeah. And it's coming from a person that they want to hear it from.
Yeah, and they extract a realness from you, which it's complement to your style of how you speak and how you deliver your message to these kids. Because as you said, the lectures ain't it. I remember vividly going to, they set up, you'd have an assembly, and there'd be people coming to talk, and it'd be more lecture based. And you're not going to get, especially young kids who are sporadic and their mind is everywhere and they're with their friends. It's very hard to get them to focus. So you obviously found a way to do that. But I think little encouragement goes a long way.
I agree. Back to the grandma thing for 1 second.
Yeah,
real quick.
100%.
I gotta just say this because it's kind of funny. It's both sides.
It's both sides.
Yeah,
okay.
the Greek is yaya and the Italian is nana. My grandma just recently figured out how to use YouTube.
Let's go.
And so every time I drop a short or a video,
she's on it. She
calls me the next day. I just watched your 15-minute vlog at Western University. I got to tell you about this, that, and the other. And it just humbles me, man. I'm like, my 84-year-old grandma's out here putting YouTube on her TV.
Yes.
And that goes a long way for me and the self-belief in my backpack.
Yeah, it's funny because like there was a whole point where like our parents kind of got, like my parents especially started getting on social media and Facebook. My mom will be like, I'm gonna go do my Facebooking now. You know what I mean? They're getting used to the social media, but yeah, it's the same. My mom watches the pods too, and she's pretty encouraging with it, and it's really exciting. You get a lot of energy from it. Agreed. It gives you a lot of energy. But yeah, that encouragement for the youth, it goes a long way, and I think that's what they're extracting from your tour. Now, speaking on the tour, let's kind of go back last year a bit because this is the second round, right?
Correct.
So let's talk about the first round a bit and just kind of explain to everybody what you did, how many places you visited, where'd you cover, and maybe to end it off, what lessons did you take from it? Because I'd imagine, like I said, you're giving a lot of energy and time, and it's coming from a positive intention. So it's something that's authentic. So it's going to extract real energy from you. What did you learn from that whole experience? And just kind of run through it for us.
Yeah, from March 19th until about June 20th, we hopped in my grandma's 2009 Pontiac Montana minivan. We drove it from Ontario all the way to Vancouver Island, about 18,500 kilometers round trip. Stopped through 5 provinces, did 87 presentations in high schools. We raised money for mental health with jack.org, donated about $11,000 to their charity as a result of the impact of the entire tour. Reached about 40,000 students. Brought this backpack literally across the country.
That thing has been everywhere across Ontario, right?
Yep. And the goal of the project was to help students realize that they didn't have to carry negative thoughts and opinions on their shoulder. I had a team with me, Cross Novia, Alian Khan, and Nina DeGagne. Nina was the driver, Alian was the tour manager, and Cross was the videographer. Mm-hmm. It was one of my first times managing other people. And it was very successful in terms of the goal we set out, in terms of fundraising, in terms of what I wanted out of it as well. Mm-hmm. And the students were very impacted. And so I was so excited to start the next one. But a big part of my daily routine is journaling before I go to sleep to capture lessons.
You every day?
Every single day. And I've done it since I was like 17. Okay. And it still trips me out to this day to go back and read the journal entries that I wrote about when I was still an athlete all the way up until today.
That's amazing, Sam.
Because
you people can turn those journals into a book.
Literally. It's like Green Lights with
Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah. People always ask, oh, did you know one day you would be doing this? It's like, how wouldn't I know? Like, I wrote about it in my journal every single day.
Really?
I believe you have to, well, when I started speaking, I started writing things that I wanted to do.
Right.
And over time, it starts becoming your life, and it blows your mind. Like, I go back and read journal entries from 2 years ago, and things I'm writing about are happening. It's like, damn, this is crazy.
So you were low-key manifesting.
Yeah, the whole time.
That's cool.
And from the day I started, I would sit in the basement and work 10 hours a day, sending emails to principals. And I told everybody in my life, I'm going to speak on stages. I'm going to get paid to do this. I'm going to make a positive difference. And the first 2-3 years was very slow. And now things are happening, and people are like, well, what changed? What happened? It's like 5 years happened, of just consistent self-belief and showing up every single day. But journaling was a big part of it. So I could capture the lessons that were unfolding in my life and ensure that I don't make the same mistakes twice, right? And not that I made mistakes on the first tour, but I had a lot to learn as a leader. I had a lot to learn as a people manager.
Right.
And some of the big lessons I learned, one, have clear roles and responsibilities for your team. I brought along friends of mine and made some emotional decisions rather than some logical business decisions. I didn't have a clear-cut outline of some of the roles and responsibilities, which led to certain people feeling left out a little bit or not being utilized to the fullest potential of their skill sets and their drive and their genius. I learned that on tour, there are some non-negotiables that I can't waver from, or it's going to affect my output and my presence on stage. Sleep is a big one that sometimes is hard to maintain when you're on the road every single day. Nutrition, optimizing our meals for low cost and healthy foods. And then exercise. And I found that when I was on the road and those 3 things wavered, everything else was 10 times more difficult. So maintaining those habits was a big learning lesson while I was on the road as well. And then having the courage to have difficult conversations. Sometimes when you're on the road living with other people that you've never lived with before, things come up that you didn't expect. Having the courage to sit down and say, hey, we have to talk about something right now, instead of carrying the weight of unspoken words on your shoulder, because that's also a burden we have to let go of. I learned that those conversations must be had. And it's funny how much internal resistance would pop up, and I think, I don't want to have this conversation because it's uncomfortable. Right. Only recently have I started having some of them, and it's helped me sleep at night and move forward to the next iteration of Sam Demma and the next experience I'm supposed to have, and just giving myself the permission to, I think it's so important to give yourself the permission to fail and make a mistake and then learn from it and promise yourself that you won't make it again. But we all get an opportunity to fail. Right. I shouldn't beat myself up because I think I did a couple things wrong. And I think that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, life is one big lesson, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when you're putting yourself out there in this sort of thing, putting people together. How important do you think it is when you're building a team to have the same vision? Or do you guys ever discuss that? Are you guys in alignment with your approach to life in general? Is that important to you, or does it really is it about finding somebody who's good at this, rolling them into that, et cetera, et cetera?
I think all of it is important, and sometimes more important for different people. On the road specifically, lifestyle alignment is really important because if my non-negotiables are going to sleep early, eating healthy foods, and exercising, and someone else that I'm living with wants to go eat certain foods that are pretty unhealthy, go to bed really late, and skip workouts, we're going to conflict with each other just because we're in the same space living all the time. There's going to be some weird energy. And so you can't hire someone based off of their choices for their lifestyle. But when you're living with someone, it's something I have to consider a little bit more closely. I think open communication is extremely important. Having those difficult conversations. I think having an onboarding process, which I didn't have the first time because we pulled this tour together and hired the team like 2 weeks before we left.
Oh, that's quick.
I was thinking about, like, we started booking the speeches January 1st. We left March 19th. I had 250 sales calls between that couple months of time, and then booked all the hotels, booked all the flights, did all the communications via email, did all the PR outreach by myself. And so I wasn't thinking about, how do I optimize this team? How do I set them up for success along with myself? And so this time around, I have an onboarding process and an entire massive survey that gives me insight into how I should talk to these people, how they like to receive feedback, how they like to be praised for their work, what they're expecting to get out of this, what their personal goals are, so I can help them reach those while they're working for me and with me. So I think having a process when you onboard people is really important. Having one-on-one debrief conversations so people have an opportunity to share what's on their mind is really important. I didn't have enough of those during the first leg of the tour, and I think it caused some problems that could have been avoided. But again, I'm learning.
Yes, very humble approach, it seems.
I'm learning, man, and I'm taking the learnings and I'm implementing them for the next iteration, which is right now.
Right. I love that. A lot of good stuff there. But I want to touch in on the difficult conversations that you mentioned, because I think it's very useful for people. We were talking before pod about with Rebecca. We got Rebecca here, my girlfriend. She's here in the fans with obviously Dean the Machine behind the camera. Shout out to Dean. But we were talking before pod about having those difficult conversations and how actually relevant it is in our life too. I want to touch on that a bit because I think it's useful for people, because people avoid confrontation, or not even with a negative connotation to it, but things that can be anxiety provoking, things that can be difficult, especially when you're talking with somebody maybe you love, you value, you appreciate, but there is something that you need to talk about and you're avoiding it. Maybe you could touch on even what you guarded from that podcast you watched with the anxiety. How did you mention it? The anxiety.
Anxiety cost.
Anxiety cost.
Alex Hormozy and Chris Good talked about this idea of anxiety cost, which is the anxiety you hold on to when you delay having a conversation you know you should have had. Like the moment you know you should have a conversation or make a decision, say you delay it for like 6 months, you might think about that conversation or decision 500 times. That mental space.
It's exhausting. We've all done it.
And it keeps replaying in your mind. And some nights it even keeps you up and your heart's beating because you're thinking about it, but you're not acting on it.
Right.
And so he urged the listeners to have those difficult conversations, to make those difficult decisions, and then simply move on with your life and business.
Right.
And there was conversations that I needed to have that I was avoiding. And what I started to ask myself is, am I avoiding the conversation, or like, am I avoiding a piece of myself? You know? Because really I was just lacking some courage. It was more about me lacking courage than it was about me reaching out to this individual and talking. And when I reached out to have the conversation, I slept like a baby the next night. Even if I didn't get the result I was looking for.
You still did it. And that's the ingredient, courage. And the way to garner that courage is by just taking the plunge and just doing it. Because on the other end of it, whatever it is, positive or negative, it's the best way forward.
I agree, man. Was there any conversations that you're avoiding right now that come to mind?
No, but there's conversations that not specifically right now, but like amongst the life and my life that I share with people, there's conversations that are fragile and maybe that you should have. There's been times with family that maybe things have come up and maybe it got lost in translation and things get a little bit heated. So it brings you into a certain state where it becomes like a volcano. It erupts because you just avoid it for so long. But eventually, when I did have those conversations, on the other end of it was most of the time a better and positive route.
Yeah.
So it's really worth it for people to just go about doing it. And is there any advice that maybe you just touched on that, like any advice you can give people on how to deal with those difficult conversations and kind of how to approach these your loved ones or your friends or your family, whoever it is, when you need to have these talks to have them?
I'm still not that great at it because I'm just getting into it.
You're learning too.
So I'm not going to act like I have it all figured out.
Right.
But I would say state the emotions you're feeling. Walk up to the person and say, this is going to be an uncomfortable conversation. We probably both don't want to have it, but I think we need to for us to both move forward with our lives. Here's what's on my heart and here's what's on my mind. I would say if you can also take responsibility at some point in that conversation about where you think you went wrong and how you contributed to whatever situation you both find yourself in, will help the other person self-reflect and look in the mirror. And all you can hope is that they take it to heart and you take it to heart and you both move on in your lives. But sometimes we can't control the actions and the opinions of other people.
Right.
I have some relationships in my family that are broken with cousins and aunts and uncles, and I've called them and expressed how much I love them and want to repair things. But if they're not willing to walk up to the table and have a conversation, there's nothing I can do about it. And so I have to just let it go and continue on with life, knowing that I did what I could control to try and solve these things.
Where does this come? Because it's a very humble. You're very humble, and I can relate to that too. Where does that come from? Like you're not a surface level guy, brother, and neither am I. Where does that deepness come from? Is it experience? Is it an influence? Where does it come from? Because I think it's beneficial, and especially with men, which I want to get into later. It's not very common for maybe men to have those conversations and stuff like that. So for guys like me and you that are like that, I'm curious to always ask another man, where does that come from? The deepness.
I think I just want more from life. And I think that being a student is one way to get there, and learning and consistently reading and consistently reflecting is just helping me live a more fulfilling life. I think most of my successes and milestones and realizations in life have come when I've stopped talking and instead started listening.
Love that.
So to remind myself that even though I'm checking off boxes on my goals, there are bigger games that I'm not even aware of. Yeah. And there are always more things to learn. And I think just reminding myself of that keeps me grounded, even when you're standing on the stage in front of thousands of people. I heard Miley Cyrus say something in a podcast where she said, when I'm on tour, think about it this way. You are the object and the crowd is the observers. And if you're always the object and they're always the observers and you never flip roles and go stand in the crowd and observe someone else, it does something crazy to your mind. And so putting myself in the reverse and reminding myself that there's so much to learn and I'm not always the subject that people are going to be watching helps me stay humble and helps me continue to learn and explore new opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a real humility to it. And I think it's like they call it in martial arts, they call it like the white belt mentality. You're always a white belt. You're always learning. There's always something to learn. And I think it's probably the best way forward. And and it's the way to improve too, right? Because it's really just an everlasting life of learning. And touching on listening too, what you were saying there. People think about communication as just speaking. I think about communication as speaking, but also listening. Because a lot of time, I'm sure you see it too throughout talking to so many different people. When you're talking with people, maybe they're just waiting for the next opportunity for them to speak. Yeah. There's a real art in listening for the people actually listening right now. There's a real art in it. There's a real art in listening because in order to communicate properly, you must listen properly too. Would you agree?
100%. I think that someone always says this, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You're supposed to listen twice as much as you speak. This is a good perspective to hold, It is. I also think that if you don't listen, you miss the opportunity to make the person speaking feel seen, heard, and understood. And if you don't make the other person you're talking to feel seen and understood, they're probably not going to listen to what you have to say either. So listening will help you influence people as well, and also make them feel special and cared for and appreciated. I know there's been times in my life where I haven't listened very well, and when people haven't listened to me, and I know how it makes me feel, and I just don't want to give other people that experience.
I love that. And there's a way of listening too when you're presenting, when you're in the crowd. So like kind of circling back to the tour. Yeah. When you are speaking and you're doing your thing, are you watching the crowd? Are you reacting? Are you changing the trajectory of the conversation depending on how the crowd is reacting? If they're attentive, if they're not, What's your perspective?
100%.
Yeah.
I have some go-to stories and sets and segments that I'll pull out if
Some
things
little
just,
tricks up the sleeve,
if things just aren't moving. I'll also address things that happen in the audience live as they happen.
Okay.
Student sneezes, I'm mid-speech, I'll say bless you, and everyone's like,
"Is a stand-up comedian vibe." Like, you know what I mean? You got to kind of employ that a bit.
Yeah, well, the way I approach my business, this calling, and this whole career is like a performer.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to call myself a speaker. I mean, I call myself a speaker, but I don't want to refer to my things as presentations. I call them performances. I organize tours following the business model of a musician because I believe there's so much more to gain from approaching it in this perspective. And it makes it more fun for the audience. They feel like they're involved in something. It's not just some person with a PowerPoint with some bullet points lecturing them on how they should change their life or make better choices. And so I approach my performance on stage the same way. I'll address things in the audience as they unfold. If a student raises their hand and says, hey, can I come up on stage and do a backflip? I bring the kid on stage and let him do a backflip.
Awesome.
This happened literally like last week.
I always wanted to be
in
able
Burlington.
to do a backflip, though. I could never just like get started.
He did like a back handspring and the splits on stage. The crowd went crazy.
Wow.
So I will address things as they happen in the room because we're all sharing that moment together. It makes it really fun and relatable for the audience.
Yeah, it's big time. And just comparing like from last year to now, taking in that energy to talk a little bit about this year's tour. What do you think you'll bring with you, you'll leave behind, and what are you looking forward to the most in this upcoming tour now?
Yeah, so we've already started. We just finished the first 2 weeks. We have so far about 65 shows confirmed over the months of September, October, and November. I'd say this time around, I don't know if this happens to people too, because it happens to me all the time. Siri just randomly starts talking.
Sam, you're too organized. Siri's just like trying to help you 24/7.
She's talking about my calendar, scheduling some stuff. We've been on the road now for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm leaving behind anger and resentment about things from the first tour.
Okay.
And that it helped me to have these difficult conversations to let that go so I can approach this one with a clear mind. I heard in a book that anger is like poison that you hold in your own hands before you throw it on somebody else. And so to just let that go and stop holding it was a big thing for me. I'm bringing on this tour a lot of passion. I'm bringing new material. I have different stories that I'm telling this time that I told from the first one.
Have you changed the talk now? It's a little bit different?
It is.
Okay.
I probably have like 3 or 4 different stories. And I've baked in some stuff that happened during the first tour that is now part of this speech.
Before I forget, I have to ask you, is there poems or like some sort of melody that like there's a melodic way? Like, is it like a short rap? Is it a poem? What is it that
I have a spoken word poem that I start my speech with.
Can you share it? Is that something that do you mind? Or
yeah, of course. Up to you. They put the world on my shoulders. I couldn't carry it. With each appointment, doctor's words getting scarier. Those walls became my second home. I mean, a barrier that put my heart in my hands while they were tearing it. They say you gotta love the game. That's why I married it. But by 17, divorced the dream and buried it 6 feet underneath my skin. I was embarrassed that my life felt black and white when I didn't wear my jersey. Words cut like knives when they're aimed at insecurities. Yeah, thank you, coach. I'll never forget what you said. Your words still run through my mind while I try to make amends. I wish someone would have told me that my words define my journey, not the name on my back or the number on my jersey. So hear me out. People's words don't define your route. You bet on you since day one, you define yourself. It's time you grab your backpack and empty it out.
Let's go.
And stop carrying the opinions of everyone else. Grab your backpack and let it all out. This is your life, ain't nobody else. And after I finished the poem, students are already thinking this is not going to be a typical assembly.
Let's go. So you open with that.
It's a pattern interrupt.
It's very
They're
good.
expecting me to walk on stage and say, hi, my name is Sam Demma. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Right.
Thank you to your principal for introducing me. I walk on stage with a 4-foot red backpack and start rapping. And then I say, you're either thinking one of 2 things right now. Bars. And kids start, I say, or you're thinking, is this guy's name Sam Demma or Eminem?
Let's go. Yeah,
But then there's 3 people in the front that think I kind of look like Central C.
Yo, you do look like Central C. Wow.
And so it's literally poem, jokes, hit him with a hard truth.
You might have to do a London accent next time you do that poem, but it is a very well,
that's a good
very
idea.
well put together.
That's a good idea.
You know what I mean? So in it, little Central C.
Yeah.
But that's very well done, Sam. That's
Thanks,
very
man.
well done. You
Appreciate
obviously
that.
orchestrated that all yourself. Did you kind of just get into a room one day and put that together, or did you kind of through experiences and like
the whole empty your backpack idea was inspired by a conversation I had with a grade 10 student struggling with his mental health. When I figured out why he was struggling, it was because he was carrying other people's thoughts about him. And so I started writing a poem about letting go of negative thoughts. And I thought, as students, if you're not letting go, you're carrying and holding on to. What do students carry? Backpacks. So I titled the poem Empty Your Backpack. And at the time, Russ, the rapper, has been a big inspiration for me.
Okay, I could see that.
And so I started writing this poem. And after I finished writing the poem, I thought if you have a pretty big backpack, or you have lots of thoughts you're carrying around, you probably have a giant bag. And so I found the backpack. But it was I want to say a 2 or 3 day period of time that I just sat in my basement and was writing these rhymes. And it's actually like 3.5 minutes long. There's an animation that I hired an animator to design. It's on YouTube if you search Empty Your Backpack.
Okay.
But it was a very cathartic experience because as I was writing it, I was thinking about my experiences carrying around negative thoughts and opinions, growing up as an athlete, and how hard it was to transition and build a new life for myself. But it was really just me, a pen, a piece of paper, and the silence of the basement.
That's where all the great things come from, isn't it?
Yeah.
The journaling, the writing of our thoughts, etc. But I want to get into another subject here, which we touched on earlier, which I wanted to bring up, which was men and their mental health. Because, two men right here talking and kind of getting deep, which men don't usually do. And you mentioned what you learned from last year and the anger and resentment, and which I want to now get into further too is pride and ego. I think that's mixed in it too with the masculine energy. So based on your opinion, what do you think it is that holds men from having these deep conversations or going to that deep rooted chats and like expressing themselves emotionally, spiritually? What do you think is holding them back? Is it culture? Is it how we set ourselves up? Is it ego, pride? Or is it a little bit of everything? What do you think?
I think ego and pride is a big one. I remember when I received certain pieces of advice or feedback that were very critical of actions that I took. The immediate emotion that I experienced was anger and frustration. And the reason I was angry and upset is because it felt like an attack on me personally.
Right.
And it's sometimes hard to separate you as your soul and a human being and the choices you've made. Because we can all make mistakes and make wrong choices, and that's okay. It's a part of life. So I would say pride and ego is a big part of it. I also think just fear, like being afraid of losing a friend, being afraid of saying the wrong thing plays a role as well. And that we talked about it earlier, but having that lack of courage to just have the conversation is a big one also.
Yeah.
So I think it's a mix of those three things.
I find it resonates with men more. I don't know if it's an innate thing, but we sometimes are reluctant to just have conversations, approach those difficult conversations, and we employ our ego more than we should. And I just think it's worth noting for people too, especially the men watching. Like, you can go deep and still be a man. Like, that doesn't mean you're not. And I think actually that's where the good stuff is. It's helped me personally, like in my relationship, in all of my relationships, just deep conversations and just opening yourself up vulnerably in that aspect. But at the same time, carrying the cross, but also shielding the sword. You're ready to go, and it's the best way forward.
Yeah, there's more than one solution to the emotions you're experiencing. Maybe certain men, every time they're frustrated or upset, just jet to the gym and do 405-pound deadlifts.
Right.
It's like, that's good for your body.
Just don't break your back.
but there's other solutions to the emotions you're feeling, and talking about it is one of them.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes more difficult to talk about it than it is to go hit a bag or lift heavy weights. But I found that sometimes having those conversations is 10 times more meaningful and impactful than dealing with those emotions in a different way.
Because we look at men's mental health, and it seems to be not in the best area right now. Both, I would say both sexes, but just speaking from my perspective of a man, I think that it is a difficult thing that we're facing as being a man in society. There seems to be this hindering force for men and the reluctancy to kind of speak on some certain things, and they're taking it out in the wrong way. So I think when people see a guy like you, especially young kids, which is very, very amazing, they could take inspiration from it and see how you bring a light mood to something that, talking about emptying your backpack, carrying these negative thoughts, which is fundamentally a deep message. But you bring this light to it, and especially as a man, I think it's useful for people.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And that's my hope. that they'll hold on to it and carry some of the things I share in their backpacks moving forward. I also think when you see somebody open up or somebody willing to talk about certain things, it encourages you to do the same. So I'm hoping that students have conversations after the speech ends with people in their lives they know they should talk to, or reach out for support. One of the beliefs I share in my speech is that when things get difficult in life, sometimes you can't lean on yourself, you have to lean on each other. And because our backpacks are invisible, people don't know what challenges we're going through. People don't know the circumstances in our lives. How could they if they can't see them? And we don't talk about them. And so urging students to, one, reach out to their friends and see if they need support and make sure they are okay, but also being open to share the struggles they face with people in their lives, because people can't recognize what they're going through, is really important.
Based on speaking to the youth, do you think it's changing? Do you think it's improving or declining in regards to that willingness to have those vulnerable conversations and stuff? What do you see?
I think it's always improving.
Yeah?
Maybe that's just the optimistic perspective in me.
Which is fine, which is good. I would agree.
Yeah, I think it's always improving.
Yeah.
I think that there's always going to be challenges. This is part of life. And every school has its own unique experiences and its own unique set of traumas, and based on where the school might even be located. There's different socioeconomics in the areas that I speak in. So everyone has their unique baggage when I enter their community. And I'm not going to say that a 60-minute presentation changes the lives of all the students, but it plants seeds that grow over time. And one of the ideas I've had recently is actually manufacturing giant backpacks. And after we leave the schools, we leave one in the foyer. And every day the students walk in, they see the backpack, and they're reminded, oh, yes, everyone has a backpack.
That's a goal. You've been doing that?
It's something we're about to start looking into.
Yeah.
And even just the idea of constantly being reminded, I have a backpack and everyone else does, encourages young people to pause before they make choices and ask themselves, is what I'm about to say right now or do going to negatively affect somebody else or positively affect them?
Right.
And that will hopefully over time change the culture of a school and the choices that young people make.
I think it is. I think it's talks like yours and hopefully conversations that I have on here. Sometimes, I get a little crazy sometimes too, but I think it's those things that plant the seeds, like you said. Now, speaking on the youth, did you intend to speak to, I know you had that experience, but did you tend to always want to speak to the youth? Is there an inclination to want to speak to youth specifically, or do you plan on in the future speaking to all ages? It doesn't matter, or do you have this niche of I feel like I can be most useful for the youth?
Back to the start of our conversation, different labels at different times. Right now, Sam Demma is married to education.
Okay.
I will be the largest speaker in the education space in the next 2 to 3 years. Every time there's an event happening, whether it's in Canada or the US, and it's on a big scale and there's gonna be thousands of young people, I'll be one of 3 names considered. I plan to have an agency that sends other speakers into schools, because at a certain point, I won't be able to fulfill all the requests that we're getting. It's already getting to a point where I'm starting to have to turn down opportunities to go in schools and speak because I just can't physically do it. There's not enough time in the day. There will be best-selling books geared towards students. I've already written the first one. I have a second one on the way. So I have this clear vision in my mind, and it's all been related to the education industry for 2 reasons. One, I think young people are very malleable. Their minds are still developing. They're open a lot more sometimes than older people to change the choices they're making, to make better decisions. And 2, I think the foundation of your life gets set at a young age. And so I think it's the most impactful time to share important ideas with people, because the choices they make and the people they surround themselves with at a young age charts the rest of their life for a set period of time. And so I feel like my contribution is the greatest with young people right now. I still do adult events every now and then. I'm starting to really enjoy speaking to teachers and educators, but I'm not marketing myself to those arenas at all right now.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I think it'll change at some point in the future. But for now, I'm married to education, and I'm going full force. I
genuinely think you're a true talent. You're a great speaker. You're very authentic. So this journey will change lots of times, but fundamentally what you're doing right now is, I feel, filled with purpose and meaning, and it's very useful for these kids. So big salute to you, which I'm going to get into the last segment very shortly, which I call salute. But before I do, I was running yesterday, and I was trying to think. Sometimes, Sam, when I run, I think about like conversations or times and or like questions that I want to ask. And I was thinking about something that I wanted to ask you. I thought it was a pretty cool question, but I wanted to ask you, what do you think the most important and useful emotion is?
That's a tough question, man.
It's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought about it too. I'll give my answer as well, but I think ours might be the same.
I think it sounds cliche, but I think it's love.
Okay.
I think love is one of them.
Yeah.
Because you can't have love for something or someone or some experience and have like any reservations in your heart or other emotions. I think it just cuts through. When you love the work that you do, it leads to showing up every single day with passion and maintaining that student mindset that we talked about. When you love the people that you serve, the audience, you always try to do what's best for them, which leads to a better performance, a better product, a better whatever you're trying to create and push out in the world. I also think that love changes people. When someone is frustrated or angry or mad at you and all you show them is love, it's like there's this thing that happens in their heart that actually helps them see, wow, this person really does believe in me and cares about me. Maybe I should change the choices that I'm making. And I also have made mistakes and had people in my life show me nothing but love. And I know that it made me self-reflect and change the person that I was becoming as a result. I think that love is a powerful emotion to change others and also change ourselves and just improve the world and the work that we do.
I love that answer, and I knew you would have a good one. I'd agree to that. I think love is, first of all, the most beautiful thing one can experience, whether it's intimately or with, because you love your friends and family too, right?
Yeah.
But I have to say, I'm a dark guy. I get deep.
Yeah.
My favorite song is Black by Pearl Jam. It's a very deep song. But I think through the darkness and sadness and difficulty, which I'm sure you can relate to on different levels, that's where you appreciate the love. When it's raining is what makes you appreciate the sun. So I think to the people listening and watching, when you're going through that tough time or you're experiencing a sadness, it's not forever. And what you could take from that is actually exactly what you need to then bring forward, to then make you a better lover, person, fighter, whatever you are. So the tough times really make the greatest people.
And it's relatable.
Yes.
Everyone has stormy days.
Yes.
Everyone has difficulties. Everyone has traumas and challenges. I'm sitting in this chair on this couch here today with you because of adversity I experienced. 100%. When we have a difficult situation, we have two choices: face it and learn from it, or walk away and run away. And I found that when I've had a difficult situation and I faced it, it's turned me into the next version of myself.
Right.
Ryan Holiday talks about the obstacle is the way. The adversity is the way,
yes.
Right? You're driving down the road and there's a giant block. You can either turn your car back around and go the opposite direction, or drive off the road around it, get 20 people, push the rock off the road. But what you do is you create a pathway that other people can follow. You go through a difficult situation, thousands of other people experience the same thing. Then they look to you and say, if he did it, maybe I could do it too. And so if you persist through the challenges and the dark times, I think it creates a pathway for so many other people to do the same.
Yes. I love that. Great addition to it. It is really where the good stuff is. And sometimes people don't see that right away, right? Especially, I think most times people don't see that right away. You get relished in it and you think, this is my forever. Or whatever adversity. I think when you face adversity, that's actually the universe providing you with an opportunity to grow. I always say this thing, and Rebecca can attest to this too: improvise, adapt, and overcome. Every single obstacle or thing that comes in your way, you apply that method to it. Improvise, adapt, and then overcome. Figure it out.
I like that.
But it's so deep. Such good conversation with you, brother. We always go like levels and levels, and I want to continue to have chats with you as you go through your journey. I'd like to stay in touch. You're a great person. You're a great guy, and I wish you an abundance of success, brother.
Thank you.
But in the last segment here on Couple Casuals podcast, we call it salute. You're an Italian guy. You understand salute. When you're at a family event or whatever it may be, somebody might step up, give a little salute, a little cheers. So I always end off the pod with giving like an opportunity to the guests to send everybody off with a salute. It's fitting, Couple Casuals, you know what I mean? So I'd like to give you the opportunity to send everybody off with a salute.
Yeah, I would say, if you haven't heard it recently, I believe in you. I think that the dreams you have in your head can and will become your reality if you choose to show up for yourself every single day and surround yourself with good couples, good people, good communication. I wish nothing but the best for you in your life and in your journey. And keep your backpack empty and your imagination full. You got this.
Keep going. I appreciate you, Sam. Best of luck. And looking forward to seeing all the content, everything coming forward, and the new book as well.
Thank you,
We'll stay in touch, brother.
Will do.
Salute. Love you, everybody. Ciao.